Have you ever noticed that two people can retire with almost the exact same amount of money, yet 20 years later, one is thriving while the other is struggling? One is traveling, helping their grandchildren, enjoying life and sleeping peacefully at night. The other is constantly worried about money, cutting expenses and wondering where everything went wrong. Now, most people assume the difference comes down to income. They think the wealthy retiree must have earned more money during their career or saved more aggressively. But after studying retirement patterns for years, I've discovered something surprising. The biggest difference often isn't how much money people had when they retired. It's what they chose to do with that money afterward. You see, retirement isn't just about building wealth, it's about protecting wealth. And unfortunately, many retirees spend decades accumulating money only to make a handful of costly decisions that slowly drain everything they worked so hard to build. That's what we're going to talk about today. In this video, I'm revealing 8 assets that wealthy retirees tend to avoid while financially struggling retirees continue buying them over and over again. And before you get upset at some of the items on this list, understand something important. This isn't about telling you what you're allowed to enjoy. It's about understanding the financial consequences behind certain decisions so you can make informed choices. Because every dollar you invest in one thing is a dollar that can't work somewhere else. And when you're retired, every dollar matters. Let's begin with one of the most common retirement traps out there, number 1, timeshares. Now, I know some people watching this own a timeshare and love it, and that's perfectly fine. But financially speaking, timeshares rarely behave like assets, they behave like obligations. The sales presentation always sounds amazing. You'll have guaranteed vacations, you'll create unforgettable family memories, you'll lock in future travel costs, and you'll always have a place to stay. Sounds wonderful, right? But here's what many retirees discover after signing on the dotted line. The purchase price is only the beginning. Then come the annual maintenance fees, the special assessments, the exchange fees, the booking restrictions, and the endless increases in ownership costs. What started as a dream vacation plan slowly turns into another monthly financial responsibility. And here's where things get really frustrating. When many owners decide they no longer want their timeshare, they discover something shocking. The resale value is often practically non-existent. Some owners literally struggle to give them away. Think about that for a moment. An asset should ideally provide value, growth, income, or flexibility. A timeshare often provides the opposite. It reduces flexibility, it creates recurring expenses, and it can become incredibly difficult to exit. That's why many financially successful retirees choose a different route. They rent. They stay where they want, when they want, for as long as they want. And they keep their money invested rather than tied up in a vacation contract. They understand something powerful. Freedom has value, and flexibility often beats ownership. Now let's move to another financial product that catches retirees every single year: high-fee annuities. This one is important because it sounds so safe. The sales pitch is incredibly appealing. Guaranteed income, protection from market downturns, peace of mind, security. Who wouldn't want those things in retirement? The problem isn't always the concept. The problem is often the cost. Many retirees don't realize how much money disappears behind the scenes through fees, commissions, riders, and restrictions. And here's what makes this especially dangerous. The more complicated the product becomes, the harder it is for investors to understand exactly how they're being charged. I've met retirees who couldn't clearly explain how their annuity worked, not because they weren't intelligent, but because the product itself was incredibly complex. And complexity often benefits the seller more than the buyer. I remember a woman who came in seeking guidance after years of owning a variable annuity. She believed it was helping secure her future. But when we looked closely, something didn't make sense. Her pension already covered most of her expenses. Her Social Security covered the rest. She wasn't worried about income. Her real goal was leaving money to her son. Yet she was stuck inside an expensive product designed primarily for income guarantees she didn't even need. The solution she purchased didn't match the problem she actually had. And unfortunately, that happens more often than people realize. Wealthy retirees typically ask a different question. Instead of asking, what product should I buy? They ask, what problem am I trying to solve? That's a huge difference, because once you identify the actual problem, you can usually find a much simpler and less expensive solution. Now let's talk about something that creates a lot of debate: whole life insurance. This topic can get emotional because people often have strong opinions. And to be fair, there are situations where whole life insurance can make sense for some younger individuals, for certain estate planning strategies, or for limited final expense purposes. But what concerns me is how often these policies get sold to retirees as investment solutions. Retirement and insurance are not always the same conversation. Insurance exists primarily to protect against risk. Investments exist primarily to grow wealth. When those two functions get blended together, things can become expensive very quickly. Many retirees purchase whole life policies expecting significant investment growth. Then they discover years later that much of their early contributions went toward commissions, fees, and policy expenses. And by then, it's difficult to unwind the decision. Wealthy retirees generally prefer simplicity. They separate insurance from investing. They let insurance do what insurance does best. And they let investments do what investments do best. That separation creates clarity. And clarity is one of the most valuable assets you can have in retirement. Because when markets get scary or life gets complicated, clear financial decisions become much easier to make. Now let's move into a category that surprises a lot of people.
Rental properties. At first glance, rental real estate seems like the perfect retirement investment. Monthly income, tangible assets, potential appreciation, tax advantages. What's not to love? Well, reality. That's what many retirees underestimate. The reality of midnight phone calls. The reality of broken water heaters. The reality of vacancies. The reality of property taxes. The reality of repairs that somehow always happen at the worst possible time. Owning rental property can absolutely work, but successful investors treat it like a business. Because that's exactly what it is, a business. And businesses require management. The mistake many retirees make is believing rental income is passive. In many cases it isn't. It's active income disguised as passive income. And the older you get, the more valuable your time becomes. One retiree I spoke with owned a property hundreds of miles away from where she lived. The property had substantial equity built into it.
But after accounting for expenses, maintenance, taxes, and management headaches, the return simply wasn't impressive. When we ran the numbers, she realized something remarkable. The same equity invested strategically elsewhere could potentially generate similar income while eliminating nearly all the stress. That realization changed her perspective completely. She stopped viewing the property emotionally and started viewing it mathematically, and that shift made all the difference. Number 5, high-yield bonds. Now, whenever people hear the phrase high yield, their ears immediately perk up. And honestly, I understand why. If you're retired, income matters. You want investments that can help generate cash flow without constantly selling assets. So when someone says, here's a bond paying significantly more than traditional bonds, it sounds attractive, maybe even responsible. But here's the catch. Higher yield almost always means higher risk. There's no magic involved. The reason these bonds pay more is because the companies issuing them are often financially weaker. In other words, investors demand higher interest because there's a greater chance the borrower may not repay the debt. That's why these bonds are often called junk bonds. Now, that doesn't automatically make them bad, but it does make them dangerous when retirees misunderstand what they're buying. I've seen people load up on high-yield bond funds because they were focused entirely on the income number. They looked at the yield and thought, this is fantastic. But they never stopped to ask why the yield was so high in the first place. And here's what happens during economic downturns. The very companies issuing those risky bonds can begin experiencing financial trouble. Defaults increase, bond prices fall, income becomes less reliable. And suddenly the safe income investment isn't looking so safe anymore. That's why wealthy retirees think differently. They don't chase yield, they prioritize stability. Let me say that again because it's important. They don't chase yield, they prioritize stability. They understand that retirement isn't a race to maximize every possible dollar of income. It's a balancing act between growth, safety, liquidity, and income. The smartest retirement portfolios function like a team. Stocks provide long-term growth. High-quality bonds provide stability. Cash provides liquidity. Each asset has a job. The problem occurs when retirees force one investment to do everything. When people try to make bonds behave like stocks, they often end up disappointed. Instead of asking, how much income can I squeeze out of this investment? Successful retirees ask, how much risk am I taking to earn this income? That's a much better question. Now let's move into one of the most confusing products available today, structured products. If you've ever sat through a financial presentation and felt completely lost halfway through the explanation, there's a good chance structured products were involved. These investments are often marketed with phrases that sound incredible. Market growth with downside protection, enhanced returns with reduced risk, participation in gains without full exposure to losses. It almost sounds like somebody discovered a way to beat the laws of investing. But whenever something sounds too good to be true, you need to slow down because investing is not magic. Risk and reward are connected, always have been, always will be. The challenge with structured products is that they're often incredibly complicated, and complexity creates confusion. Confusion creates dependence, and dependence often benefits the person selling the product. Think about it this way. If you can't explain to your spouse how an investment works in 2 or 3 minutes, should you really own it?
That's a serious question, because your retirement should not depend on products you don't fully understand. I've met retirees who purchased structured products because the presentation sounded impressive. They loved hearing words like protection and participation. But years later, they still couldn't explain how their returns were calculated. They didn't know the restrictions, they didn't understand the limitations. And they certainly didn't realize how difficult it could be to access their money. Wealthy retirees generally take a simpler path. They prefer investments that are transparent. Investments they can understand, investments they can monitor, investments they can explain. Because complexity doesn't automatically create value. In many cases, complexity simply hides costs. And the older I get, the more I appreciate simplicity. Simple doesn't mean unsophisticated. Simple means understandable.
And understandable investments tend to produce fewer unpleasant surprises. Now let's talk about something many people dream about for decades: vacation homes. This one is emotional because it represents a vision. Maybe you've imagined a beach house, a mountain cabin, a lakeside retreat, a place where the family gathers every holiday, a place where memories are made, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that dream. The issue isn't the dream, the issue is the financial reality that often follows. Many retirees focus almost entirely on the purchase price, but ownership costs continue forever. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, utilities, landscaping, unexpected emergencies. The expenses don't take vacations. And here's what surprises many owners. They often use the property far less than expected. Life gets busy, health changes, travel preferences evolve, family schedules become complicated. Before long, the vacation home sits empty for much of the year while the bills continue arriving every month. Meanwhile, that money could have remained invested and growing. Wealthy retirees often recognize a powerful truth. Access can be more valuable than ownership. Instead of buying a vacation property, they rent incredible properties whenever and wherever they want. One year they visit the mountains, the next year they visit the beach. The year after that, they travel internationally. They're not tied to a single location. They maintain flexibility, and flexibility creates options. Remember this, a vacation home isn't just a purchase, it's a commitment. And before making any major commitment in retirement, it's worth asking whether the lifestyle benefit truly justifies the financial cost. Now let's move to another major wealth killer, actively managed mutual funds. This one surprises people because actively managed funds have been around forever. Many retirees own them right now. In fact, some people assume active management must be better because they're paying more for it. That assumption makes sense. After all, when you buy a better car, you expect better performance. When you hire an expert, you expect better results. But investing doesn't always work that way. Over long periods of time, many actively managed funds fail to outperform their benchmark indexes. And even when they do outperform temporarily, fees often consume much of the advantage. Think about the math. If you're paying management fees year after year after year, those costs compound. But unlike investment gains, fees compound against you. They're quietly draining money from your portfolio every single year. And because the deductions happen gradually, many investors never notice. It's like having a small leak in a tire. At first, everything seems fine, but over time, the loss becomes significant. Wealthy retirees understand something powerful. Controlling costs is one of the few things investors can actually control. You can't control markets, you can't control interest rates, you can't control economic cycles, but you can control fees. You can control expenses, and you can control how much of your returns you get to keep. That's why many successful retirees favor low-cost index investing, not because it's exciting, not because it sounds sophisticated, but because it works. And investing isn't supposed to entertain you. It's supposed to help you achieve your goals. Far too many retirees spend their lives searching for the perfect investment when they should be focusing on the perfect process. The right process usually beats the right prediction, every single time. So now that we've covered these 8 retirement traps, let's talk about what wealthy retirees do differently, because avoiding mistakes is only half the equation. Building lasting financial security requires a strategy. And the first thing wealthy retirees understand is that retirement isn't about getting rich anymore. It's about staying rich. That's a completely different objective. When you're 35 years old, you can afford mistakes. You have decades to recover. When you're retired, the rules change. Your focus shifts toward preservation, efficiency, and sustainability. The most successful retirees I've met don't spend their time searching for miracle investments. They spend their time protecting what they've already built. They prioritize flexibility. They prioritize liquidity. They prioritize tax efficiency. And most importantly, they prioritize simplicity. They understand that complexity often increases risk rather than reducing it. Their portfolios aren't filled with exotic products. They're not chasing every new financial trend. They're not constantly looking for shortcuts. Instead, they build systems. And systems create consistency. Consistency creates confidence. Confidence creates peace of mind. And peace of mind may be the most valuable retirement asset of all. Because what's the point of having money if you're constantly worried about losing it? That's not freedom. That's stress with a larger bank account. The retirees who truly thrive understand that wealth isn't measured solely by dollars. It's measured by choices. The ability to say yes to opportunities, the ability to help family members, the ability to travel when you want, the ability to sleep peacefully at night knowing your finances are under control. That's real wealth. If you've noticed a pattern throughout this video, it's this. The difference between wealthy retirees and struggling retirees is rarely intelligence. It's rarely luck. And it's certainly not always income. More often than not, it's decision-making. It's understanding the difference between something that feels like an asset and something that actually behaves like an asset. Because appearances can be deceiving. A timeshare feels like an investment. A vacation home feels like an investment. A complicated financial product feels sophisticated. A high-yield bond feels productive. An actively managed fund feels professional. But feelings don't determine financial outcomes. Numbers do. And one of the greatest dangers in retirement is making emotional financial decisions. Now, don't misunderstand me. Retirement should absolutely be enjoyable. You should travel. You should spend time with family. You should create memories. You should enjoy the rewards of decades of hard work. But there's a difference between enjoying your wealth and slowly destroying your wealth. The retirees who maintain financial independence for decades understand this distinction. They learn to ask better questions. Instead of asking what sounds exciting, they ask what creates long-term value. Instead of asking what are other people buying, they ask how does this fit into my overall retirement plan. Instead of asking what can I earn, they ask what can I keep. Those questions change everything. Because retirement isn't won through a single great investment. It's won through thousands of smart decisions made over many years. It's avoiding unnecessary mistakes. It's controlling expenses. It's reducing taxes whenever possible. It's maintaining flexibility. It's protecting against unnecessary risk. And perhaps most importantly, it's recognizing opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is one of the most powerful concepts in personal finance. Yet very few people think about it consistently. Every dollar you spend has an alternative use. Every dollar invested in one place can't be invested somewhere else. When wealthy retirees evaluate a financial decision, they don't just look at what they're getting. They also look at what they're giving up. That's a completely different way of thinking. Let's go back to the vacation home example. The question isn't simply, can I afford this property? The better question is, what else could this money accomplish if I didn't buy this property? Could it generate income? Could it improve financial security? Could it provide greater travel flexibility? Could it help future generations? Those are the types of questions successful retirees ask. The same principle applies to every asset we've discussed today. Every decision has a cost. Some costs are obvious, others are hidden. Some costs show up immediately, others appear years later. The challenge is that hidden costs are often the most dangerous. They're the ones that quietly erode wealth without attracting attention. That's exactly why simplicity matters so much. Simple investments are easier to monitor. Simple investments are easier to understand. Simple investments are easier to adjust when life changes. And life will change. That's one thing we know for certain. Health changes, family situations change, markets change, tax laws change, your goals may even change. That's why flexibility is so valuable. The more flexible your financial plan is, the easier it becomes to adapt. And adaptability is one of the greatest strengths a retiree can possess. Think about the people who struggled financially during difficult economic periods. Many weren't necessarily poor planners. Many simply lacked flexibility. Their money was locked up. Their options were limited. Their ability to respond was restricted. Meanwhile, retirees with liquid, diversified, flexible portfolios often had far more choices available. And choices create resilience. Now let's talk about another characteristic I consistently see among wealthy retirees. They surround themselves with the right people. This may be one of the most underrated financial decisions you'll ever make. because the people you listen to influence the decisions you make. The best retirees don't look for salespeople, they look for guides. They look for professionals whose incentives align with their goals. They look for advisors who focus on planning rather than product pushing. Unfortunately, not everyone in the financial industry operates that way. Some firms are structured around selling products. And when sales drive the conversation, recommendations can become biased. That's why it's important to ask questions. How is this person compensated? Why are they recommending this solution? Are there simpler alternatives? What are the fees? What are the risks? What are the restrictions? A trustworthy advisor should welcome those questions. In fact, they should encourage them, because transparency builds trust. And trust is earned through honesty, not sales presentations. One conversation I had recently really reinforced this point. An advisor told me he was leaving his firm because he felt uncomfortable with how often clients were being placed into products that generated large commissions. He said it seemed like nearly every retirement plan ended with the same recommendation, not because it was necessarily the best solution, but because it was the most profitable solution for the firm. That bothered him. And honestly, it should bother all of us, because retirement planning should start with your goals, not somebody else's sales target. That's why wealthy retirees stay focused on outcomes. They're not impressed by flashy presentations. They're not impressed by complicated charts. They're not impressed by buzzwords. They care about results. Can this strategy help me maintain my lifestyle? Can it help me preserve my wealth? Can it help me manage risk? Can it help me achieve my long-term goals? If the answer is yes, great. If not, they move on. That discipline is incredibly powerful. And it's one of the reasons wealthy retirees often remain wealthy, not because they make perfect decisions, but because they avoid enough bad decisions. And honestly, that's an important point. Financial success isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. You don't need to hit home runs, you don't need to predict every market movement, you don't need to find the next great investment opportunity, you simply need to avoid the mistakes that permanently damage your financial future. And that's exactly what today's video has been about. Avoiding the traps, avoiding the distractions, avoiding the products and assets that often create more problems than they solve. Because retirement should be a season of freedom, not financial anxiety. It should be a season of confidence, not confusion, a season of purpose, not constant worry. The goal isn't to die with the biggest portfolio possible. The goal is to build a retirement that allows you to live well, give generously, and enjoy the life you work so hard to create. So as we wrap up, remember these 8 assets that wealthy retirees often avoid. Timeshares, high-fee annuities, whole life insurance used improperly as an investment, poorly managed rental properties, high-yield bonds purchased without understanding the risks, complicated structured products, vacation homes that become financial burdens, and expensive actively managed funds that quietly eat away at returns. Avoiding these traps won't automatically make you wealthy, but it can help you avoid the costly mistakes that destroy wealth. And sometimes that's even more important, because keeping money is often harder than making money. The retirees who understand that lesson give themselves a tremendous advantage. They stay focused, they stay disciplined, they stay flexible, and they put every dollar to work with purpose. If that's the kind of retirement you want, start evaluating your financial decisions through that lens today. Ask better questions, demand transparency, keep things simple. And always remember that the most powerful retirement plans are rarely the most complicated ones. They're the ones built on sound principles, smart decisions, and consistent execution over time. Thank you so much for watching. If you found value in this video, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment below, and share this with someone who is approaching retirement or already retired. And if you'd like help creating a retirement strategy designed around your goals, your lifestyle, and your future, be sure to check out the training link below. My team and I have put together a comprehensive resource that walks through the exact principles we've discussed today and shows you how to create a retirement plan designed for long-term success. Remember, retirement isn't about having the most money. It's about having enough freedom to live life on your terms. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.